Hi, good morning. A very warm welcome to the Jobs Fund webinar, Investing in Education, Enhancing Skills for Employability. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. The world of work is rapidly changing, and we have to respond with more agility. But importantly, we must also be more innovative in our responses and in our approaches. We have to reduce the time it takes for learners to identify their pathway and to meaningfully connect them, be it to the labour market, further education, or self-employment, whatever their choice might be. Today, we share with you the work of 3 of our partners, SmartStart, Columba, and Newbridge. We hope that you will leave here inspired to do more and to do better. Just a little bit about our process this morning. All our participants are muted. We encourage you to post your questions to the speakers in the chat. Also, there might be many of you who would like to know more about our 11th funding round. Please, there's information on the Jobs Fund website, jobsfund@treasury.gov.za. There's also FAQs that will help you to complete your application, and we'll also post in the link in the chat the link to the website. I now hand you over to Nazeem Hendricks, a senior technical advisor and program lead in the Jobs Fund. Thank you, Nazeem.
Thank you. Thank you, Najwah. So just by way, good morning and welcome again to everybody present. This is indeed a very important subject and something that is very close to our hearts. But just before we start, just a bit of background on the Jobs Fund. So the Jobs Fund was established or capitalized in 2011 by the then President as a unit of National Treasury, with an initial capitalization of 9 billion, to operate along challenge fund principles. Now, one has to say that the Jobs Fund is not a mass employment program. It was established within a context of high levels of unemployment and also instruments that did not necessarily meet the needs of our economy or our people and youth in particular. So the Jobs Fund was established to inspire innovation and collaborate with other entities within government as a program to co-fund programs to address specific barriers inhibiting job creation. In particular, the Jobs Fund is here to test innovative approaches to job creation, encourage wider adoption of those successful models and learnings, and also further adoption of the challenge fund instruments. Very importantly, the Jobs Fund shares risk with intermediaries which it contracts, and it's really about catalyzing social returns with those intermediaries. It is really about accessing the skill, reach, and capacity of those intermediaries to achieve the outcomes, the social outcomes that we're looking to achieve. The Jobs Fund was established with a knowledge sharing agenda, which today's webinar is a crucial component of. It is one of our fundamental pillars, and we have in place a rigorous monitoring, evaluation, and reporting framework to govern that process and then bring what we have learned in implementing those innovative models to the wider market. To this end, we host regular interventions like this webinar. Next slide, please. So to that end, I think young people face multiple deprivations in gaining access to the economy in general. And one of those key components of deprivations is the access to quality and enabling education. It is widely acknowledged that the issues that we face within our education system is a root cause of the lack of employability and ultimate unemployment levels in our country. And we have with us today 3 interventions which is currently being tested by the Jobs Fund to provide us with insights and learnings as to what is best practice within this industry, in trying to reach our goals within the education system. And we have 3, like I said, we have SmartStart, represented by Hopolang Selebalo. We have Columba Leadership Trust, represented by Monique Blignaut, and we have the Newbridge Graduate Institute, represented by Craig Duff. Now, I think without further ado, I think we're going to go into the presentations from these people because that's what we're here for. And we're going to start with SmartStart. Next slide, please. So SmartStart, as I've said, is represented by Hopolang Selebalo, the advocacy lead for their program. Over to you, Hopolang.
Thank you so much, Nazeem. Thank you for that warm introduction, and good morning, everybody. I'm grateful to be here today to chat to you about the work of SmartStart under the theme of the Jobs Fund seminar, Investing in Education and Enhancing Skills for Employability. I'll take you on a quick run through of how SmartStart works, our vision, some of the pressure points we've identified in terms of the early learning landscape, some of the interventions we propose, and essentially our way of working. I'm going to switch off my camera as I take you through the slides. Next slide, please. So we are South Africa's first national early learning delivery platform, and our vision is to achieve population-level change in terms of access to quality and affordable early learning programs. We consist of a network of 14 NGOs who we call franchisors, and over 9,000 ECD practitioners who we call franchisees. You'll see at the bottom there the logos of our partner organizations that enable us to do the work that we do. Collaboration and partnership are at the heart of our approach. We use a social franchise model, and our franchisors and branches, and I'll explain the definition of branches a bit later. Our franchisors and branches license and support practitioners to deliver quality early learning programs for 3 to 5-year-olds. In the 7 years since our inception, our early learning programs have reached over 100,000 children across South Africa. Next slide, please. We currently have over 67,000 children registered in a SmartStart program. And we've got 8,717 franchisees at the moment. You'll notice from the slide that the dominant area in which we are based is classified as transitional townships. So these are more along the lines of informal settlements, as we try and cater for quintile 1 and quintile 2 communities where the access gap is highest. Quintile 1 and 2 being those that we consider under-resourced and poorer communities where access is quite limited. And I'm hoping the key on the left-hand side is helpful to differentiate between the tapestry. Next slide, please. So data tells us that over 1.3 million 3 to 5-year-olds are not attending early learning programs. And while the figure we cite here is dated on the slide, a recent presentation by the Department of Basic Education confirmed that the figure still is relatively the same and has slightly increased. So that is still the current scenario in terms of learners that are, or at least children that are not in programs. The bulk of this figure is comprised of children from quintile 1 and 2 communities at over 800,000 of these children. And we've identified that closing the supply gap for early learning programs requires a pipeline of practitioners and additional venues, which are essentially quite limited at the moment. The venue question can be addressed by recognizing and leveraging existing infrastructure, such as home and community-based venues, especially if we want to penetrate the quintile 1 and 2 communities, which in urban areas in particular are quite densely populated with little space for new build. And even if we were anticipating new build to add to the constellation of venues, that still takes quite a lot of time and won't allow us to reach universal access by 2030, as indicated in the National Development Plan. Next slide, please. So to achieve population level change rapidly, we need to enlarge system capacity and improve the quality of our programs, so system quality. And in terms of capacity, without a human resource pipeline and sufficient venues for early learning programs, it will be impossible to improve access for children. And even where early learning programs do exist, quality is highly variable. And we know that children generally benefit from attendance at early learning programs if a certain level of quality is provided. So to ensure system capacity and system quality, that horizontal line of affordability is critical at the bottom there. And affordability through subsidies and stipends for practitioners is essential to enable the realization of these variables. An enabling regulatory framework is also important, one that allows for seamless access to subsidies, training support for practitioners, and pre-registration support for those that are looking to get into the system, get registered, and unlock the subsidy. Okay, I see questions which I'll answer. Next slide, please. So there is a massive pool of untapped human capital in South Africa. Early learning programs have the potential to create direct employment and support micro-enterprise development for women in particular. So this illustration that you see in this slide shows how human resource development is linked to questions of sustainable livelihoods and the social economy. Our recruitment pathway, which seeks to optimize human capital and ensure the delivery of quality programs, means that we need to find the right people to enter the early learning landscape. We need to train them and to prompt meaningful income for their work, as well as a system with formal qualifications that ensure higher quality of programs. So optimized human capital and high quality programs are interlinked. Next slide, please. Our delivery system works on the basis of a strong network, as I mentioned earlier, which includes the SmartStart hub, and I'll speak through that, franchisors and franchisees. The orange bar there is the SmartStart hub, and we run the franchise, contracting with franchisors and providing training and technical support. The hub is also responsible for program design, materials, and training. It also defines the licensing and quality assurance systems and operational processes and tools. And then I mentioned earlier that I defined a branch. So we have 3 branches within the hub in Gauteng, in KZN, and Northwest, which perform the same role as franchisors. The next tier is the franchisors or our implementing partners. These are existing long-standing ECD service providers and NGOs, which we have an agreement with to recruit, license, and support franchisees in a specific area. Franchisors also employ coaches who run the network of clubs and oversee quality assurance. And at the top of the tier, we have our franchisees, our practitioners, also known as Smart Starters. These are independent early learning programs that have been licensed by franchisors. They make income through government subsidies and stipends and parent fees. And most of these practitioners run their programs from home and community-based venues. Next slide, please. And the next one. So just a quick overview of the range of settings in which our franchisees work. I just want to start with the donut/pie there on the right-hand side, just to say that approximately 35% of our franchisees or practitioners are youth. So we're seeing more youth enter the system, a system that's historically been known to be run by older women. So this is quite a positive move in the context where youth unemployment is so high. In terms of where our programs run from, the first there you'll see we have large home and community-based programs. So these are full-time programs with more than 6 children, which run from homes or from community premises like church halls. We find that actually in South Africa, there are a significant number of programs that run in these spaces, and that's why we encourage utilizing these and recognizing these spaces. In terms of, and then the second one, we have classrooms in existing ECD centers, so multi-class ECD programs for children of all ages, running from existing purpose-built premises. We've got play groups, which are part-time programs for up to 12 children, which usually run 2 3-hour sessions a week, and some programs have 2 groups. And finally, we have day mothers or childminders, where legislation here is a little bit murky and quite difficult. These are full-time programs with 6 or fewer children run from a practitioner's home. Next slide, please. In terms of the SmartStart value chain from recruitment to actual practice, we invest a lot of time and energy in this process. And we try to plug that gap where the orange gap, it says, you'll see there 1 and 2. So, and 5 and 6. So the elements that are highlighted in yellow are essential for closing the access gap, but are inconsistently available in the early learning delivery landscape. So we begin with community activations and awareness building in the communities that we've identified, and again, usually under-resourced communities. We provide startup training. We look at venues and we conduct checks of the practitioners that are interested. And then we provide the fuller package of curriculum, resources, play kits, and so forth. So you'll see that this is a trajectory that goes on for quite a while, but that's what it takes to bring in and recruit and train and support a smart starter until they get to a point of practice, professional development, and financial sustainability. Next slide, please. So we conducted an external team was commissioned to conduct an evaluation on SmartStart programs in 2018. I'm hoping that the slide is self-explanatory. But at the start of this, 32% of children were achieving the standard for their age. And 8 months later, immersed in SmartStart programs, 62% of these children were achieving the standard for their age. The study also took into account the maturation effect that time allows. But we are seeing positive outcomes from those children that are in SmartStart programs. And you'll see the red there. So we have a red, an orange, and a green. And those children that were initially in the red at the beginning actually moved to the orange, while others moved to the green. So there was like a clear trajectory of progress from children across these 3 bands. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So this last slide, or not actually the last one, I'm sorry, this almost the last slide, illustrates the problems that are not solved for prior to the registration of programs by the state, by government. And this is where we see the most hurdles. So just before that red line on the left-hand side is where things are a bit difficult for practitioners, particularly for those, firstly, emerging practitioners, particularly for those in under-resourced communities, because the requirements for compliance are so high and so onerous. And in addition, they are quite costly. So to get from stage 3 to 4, for example, is quite a hurdle. But recognizing that the range of modalities that enable access to early learning programs are below the current standards of registration, we support sites to move towards registration through pre-registration support, for example. But we are also immersed in the adaptation or the amendments to the existing regulatory framework that will hopefully enable easier registration processes for practitioners that will be less costly, that will enable them to unlock the subsidy in order to ensure that their programs are of quality and that they are sustainable and that they're able to cultivate livelihoods from the programs that they run. Next slide, please. So in kind of following up from my last comment on the previous slide about the kind of asks that we have and the policy recommendations that we have and the work that we're doing in partnership with government departments such as the Department of Basic Education, we are calling for the support of home and community-based programs. You can see there that nearly 40% of early learning programs are run from homes, while 5% in state-owned venues. And if we continue with state-owned venues exclusively, then we aren't going to get anywhere very fast. And considering the urgency of the situation, we have to look at other ways of ensuring access. Secondly, we are calling for the unlocking of funding. So currently about 600,000 children receive the per child subsidy, which is 17 Rand per child per day. But about 4.7 million 0 to 5-year-olds are eligible to receive it. So there are many, many children that are not in the basket or in the net to allow them to access the per child subsidy, compromises the quality of the programs that they receive. And it obviously makes it quite difficult for practitioners to sustain their programs. And then most importantly, the simplification of registration processes. As I said, the requirements, particularly at the municipal level where compliance is required, are quite onerous and quite costly. And only 33% of ECD programs are registered and eligible for the ECD subsidy currently. And then finally, and I think quite importantly as well, is the recognition and support for informality, because that is the context in which many of our programs take place. So ECD programs largely operate informally and with very little support, providing, but they provide a real need in our communities. And it's good, it would be a positive move for us to buffer these programs and recognize the settings in which they're taking place. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So yes.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you so much. I'm also
By the way.
like my eyes shift into the questions. Thank you so much for listening and yeah, and for having me on here.
Thank you, Hopolang. There's been a number of questions. Your colleague Justine has kindly answered most of them. There was two questions, or one question really relating to how you measure success. I wanted you to expand on a little bit for us, because there was a question about what is success to SmartStart, and then there was also a question, how do you monitor or how do you measure the quality of the programs that you're implementing? And if you could give some insight into that, please.
Sure. In terms of, I'd appreciate if Justine could answer that second question around the specific indicators used to monitor the quality of programs. She's our programs design lead and is responsible for our quality assurance. But in terms of measuring success, it's the number of children enrolled in early learning programs. When we start seeing improvements there, the quality that these children received in these programs, and that's why we do these evaluations to assess whether we see child progress. And the number of practitioners also getting into ELP, into the ELP space, early learning program space, as well as being able to register and unlock government subsidies and financial support to enable them to run their programs and sustain them effectively. Those are like the indicators of success. Of course, once we reach that milestone of ensuring that there's access for all children by 2030, we know that we would have won, but we want to ensure that we scale up access as quickly as possible. I'm not sure if Justine is able to come in for the second question.
Hopolang, she has, but she has spoken to the indicators that is available in which you test basic success of the program. So she has answered that. Just one thing, the evaluations you referred to on your program, is that available on your website?
It is available to share, if I'm correct. I know we've got a copy, but it's not on our website.
It used to be, but I don't know with the revision of the website. I'm just not 100% sure. We'll have to check, but they should be. We'll share it. Welcome. And we're actually in the process of a second child outcomes evaluation this year as well, just out of interest. But that was our previous one. Should be there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Justine. There was just one more question there. The tools and checklists that you use to measure the improvement of the children as an outcome, as opposed to from the perspective of the practitioners themselves. If you can just comment on that briefly, please.
Justine?
Sure. So the international practice is not to test children at this age, because that's obviously young, you know, and if you can think of 3 and 5 year olds, testing is not appropriate for them. Even grade R, we don't test children. So what we do is we have an extensive sort of set of assessments that practitioners need to pass, and then they go through a licensing process where we using standards and assessment to check their ability. And then we do an annual check of the learning environment. And that's sort of international standard at this level, is you don't assess the child, but you assess the learning environment, that learning environment is providing the kind of context that would enable the outcomes we're looking for. So that's what we do on an annual basis through annual quality assurance systems. And then each practitioner is trained to track children's progress, and they report to parents on this, but this is not used as a measure of success because it's not a test. And so we can't ensure reliability. It's more to support parents and practitioners to offer the kinds of activities that would support children's development rather than benchmarking them against others. And so we do that. Practitioners are trained on that, and they do that twice a year with parents. And then the last thing we do as part of that checking of child's progress is every 3 years, we revisit an external evaluation where we use a team of external evaluators who train to conduct assessments appropriately for children at this age. And they then check a wide sample of SmartStart children to ensure that across that sample, we're still achieving the outcomes we've been proven to achieve previously. So hopefully that answers your question. And then Polly's just asking, is SmartStart a Jobs Fund beneficiary? And yes, we are. The process with Jobs Fund has been very exciting because it's about understanding these micro entrepreneurs as small employment opportunities in providing these services for children. And it comes back to Hopolang's point about we know we need so many more practitioners and venues if we're going to be reaching the children who are currently missing out in South Africa.
Thank you very much, Hopolang and Justine. Very insightful presentation. We can see from the comments that has been very well received. And I'm sure there are many more questions, which we're happy to facilitate to you. The second, if I can move on to our second Jobs Fund partner that we are testing a particular initiative with, that is the Columba Leadership Trust, who is represented by Monique. Just as an aside, Monique spent 3 years in the insurance industry, and I think at some stage she saw the light, and recognized that she could make a significant impact in our communities and particularly in our schools. And she went back to studying and eventually ended up at Columba. So over to you, Monique.
Thank you so much, Nazeem. Good morning, everybody. Such a privilege to be here today. So for those of you who don't know who Columba Leadership is or what Columba Leadership does, I'll briefly just give a brief background and then I'll switch off my camera and go into our presentation. So Columba Leadership is a values-based leadership program that works in high schools around the country, in specifically 6 provinces, the Western Cape, KZN, Free State, Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and a part of Northwest. And we do leadership training on the backdrop of values. We believe that it's important for us to have ethical leaders. And why not start at a high school level already at grade 10? To train these young people not only to be leaders, but leaders with values. And these values are awareness, focus, creativity, integrity, perseverance, and service, which we believe is essential values that a leader should have. So I think let me jump straight into the presentation. And for the sake of this, I'll just switch off my camera so that it doesn't affect anybody's bandwidth. So we're speaking about leadership and we're speaking about how do we enhance young people's employability skills, you know, and what is it that Columba does? I think one of the key challenges that we want to address is the fact that the school space doesn't enable young people to develop holistically. We work in mostly quintile 1 to 3 schools, and in these schools, oftentimes there's a lot of pressure from the district because they want to push results, and the young people are then just forced to focus on academics and not on all of the other beautiful things. And we know we live in such a diverse country with diverse young people, with diverse interests and talents and skills, and so school space doesn't always allow that because educators are also so overwhelmed and undercapacitated in terms of resources. So the focus is just on academics. When you speak to educators in schools, you oftentimes hear, you know, young people they use these words, young people are not motivated enough to learn. They are disengaged, they are distracted, and they're not involved in the school space. Some of the challenges we also know is very rife in our communities when we speak about your township communities and your rural communities, is these numerous social ills that we have. Substance abuse starts creeping into the school, vandalism, our own schools, communities start damaging school properties, and a general sense of, you know, late coming, people being late all the time. There's a high dropout rate in high schools, and we can see it from, I love the fact that SmartStart started before me. We can see it from the enrollment from grade 1 and how many young people actually make it to matric. So there's a high dropout rate, and that's something we want to address by having young people with agency, young people who lead themselves and who's passionate about what they want to do. There's also limited formal employment prospects for young people who don't have any experience, who don't have the necessary soft skills to transition successfully. So Columba aims to work on those, developing their skills so that they are able to transition successfully into the world of work, university, and even into entrepreneurship. Next slide for me, please. So somebody might ask, how do we do this? So we start with young people in grade 10. If it's the latter part of the year, we would do with grade 9s, and we take them through this intense residential experience where we train them on leadership, 5 days away from school, with the principal of the school, a few educators of the school, and learners. And we take them to a nature reserve, a panorama of possibility, a space where it's different than the noise in the school and the community. And we take them through this intense experience where they get to have an experiential experience about what leadership with values means. And as they go through that, once they go back to their school, they now have to apply what we have taught them over that 5-day experience. But we also journey with them throughout that 2 to 3 year journey. We help them after they return from the residential academy. We help them to say, okay, young people, so what is the plan? Come up with a vision and a goal, which is in line with the school's vision. Bring the other youth leadership structures in the school together, and you guys work on a strategic plan together. We then help them to come up with a project plan for the next 2 to 3 years, and they get to recruit more young people to be involved in this movement of young leaders who are activated and want to bring about change. The nice key part is, as they're busy doing projects in their school, addressing some of the social ills like late coming, like substance abuse, they're developing those necessary soft skills that would set them apart from their peers. They start learning how to communicate verbally, in writing. They start having critical thinking skills because they have to argue about how do we solve this thing in an innovative way in our school. If it is substance abuse, let's not do the same things we did in the past, but come up with innovative and creative ideas. In that 2 to 3 year journey, Columba journeys with that young person until they matriculate. But then after they matriculate, they become part of our alumni network. Now, our alumni network is these motivated and vibrant young people who go into different spaces after they matriculate. And they go and impact that spaces, whether it be in their workspace, whether it be in the university, or whether it be if they start their own companies. But Columba also assists some of them to bridge them to opportunities that we have with some of our partners. We can move to the next slide. So how do we do this? This is this young person in high school. How do we give them the skills that enhances them and makes them better for employability after they finish? We start on the top at grade 10, a call to action. We say to this young person, you know what? And I think everybody on this call knows that somebody in one point in your leadership journey said to you, I believe in you, and I know you can do this, and they were cheering you on. And that's what Columba goes in and calls them to action to say, if you want to see change, be that change you want to see, but we want to come alongside you. We see that you have potential. And when we select the young people that go to our program, we select quite a diverse group of young people. We know most programs go into the school and they only select the high academic performers. No, we want high academic performers, underperformers, your shy learner, a learner with behavioral issues, those who are negative influence, those who are positive influence. And a lot of you in the space know the education space so well that you know that the negative influence normally has the biggest crowd. And if Columba can change that young person to change their energy and drive it into a positive direction, the crowd that follows them is much bigger. So we create that movement of values leaders in the school. And then we take them on this residential academy where we empower them how to be leaders with values. But I think a key thing in the school space is if we want to, close that gap, we need to have a supportive environment. A supportive environment would require an enabling principal. It would require supportive teachers. And so Columba takes time to invest in the educators and the principal in the school as well. We have communities of practices with our principals who are part of our program. We take our educators on a 3-day training where we empower them to start seeing young people like a solution and become supporters and enablers of that process. In the social action that young people do, these are projects, but projects that comes from them, is led by them, but the educators and the principals are basically supporting because, young people always need those mentors still around them. So they are doing these projects, they're developing the skills they need. We also give them toolkits, which is like your individual development plan that helps them. On an individual level, I'm working towards something. I need to develop skills. I need to start creating my own LinkedIn account. I need to start doing career research. So we also provide them with that tools whilst they're in the space. We give them some navigational tools on our online pages, our YouTube pages, CV writing skills, etc., so that we get them ready to transition. And all these online resources is also accompanied by a lot of online events that they can join. Like even coming Saturday, we have an online career day that young people can join. So everything is centered around this young person to get them ready for transitioning. We can move to the next slide. I think one of the key things is, for Columba, people might ask, why is youth engagement important? That's a very vital question for us. We see young people as part of the solution and not actually as part of the problem. It just depends on how we engage them. It's your approach to them, and if you engage them in the right way and you give them the platform to do things in the school, they can do some amazing things. Next slide for me, please. What is the benefits of having youth engaged in projects and getting youth doing stuff in the schools? Number one, increase personal skills. They have those soft skills that they need to transition better. They also learn healthy choice making, you know, especially because that age is an age where they can make the wrong decisions. But now they are told that I'm a leader. It builds character and purpose in them, and they get to they build their own identity and understand that I'm a leader and I influence in every space that I go. On a social level, I think for young people, if we listen to Maslow's hierarchy, it speaks about identity versus role confusion. So this is an age where young people want to belong to something. That's why some of them would get involved in gangs and etc. But being part of the youth engagement in the school, it gives them something to connect to that's positive. You know, I'm taking charge of my school. I want to bring about change, and I can do stuff there in that space. On a systems level, if we hear the youth's voice more and more and we see them more there, they start inputting in the school improvement plan. Now, educators and principals need to see them as a valuable voice for what needs to change in the school. They sit on SGB level, they speak there and say, this is what we need to change. But ultimately, what we want is young people to start being a voice is that the department starts hearing that young people have a voice as well. Next slide. So these are just some of our stats. I spoke about, you know, learner retention. So 2021, we had 94. 2022, which is not on here, we had 95. Generally, our young people, because they have this thing of purpose and passion and agency, on a national level, they would normally have a better pass rate than the national stats. So we would look at 2021, young people, 91% versus the 76 national pass. Next slide for me, please. A lot of them also then assume leadership positions. 74% of them who didn't see themselves as leaders before they became part of the Columba program, then starts getting involved in community projects, starts then becoming part of they are then elected at the next year as the RCL in the school. So they take on formal leadership roles. Eligibility for university, 82% of our young people, because we instilled that in them. And I want to reiterate again, a group that is diverse, and it was not only the academically high-performing groups. So Columba takes the time to work with these young people for 2 to 3 years, get them to do projects. We are their thinking partner, we support them, we motivate them. But the whole thing is that as they go through this journey, they develop skills that sets them apart from their peers who come from the same townships and communities they come. If they already know how to work in a team at the high school level, by the time they get to university, they would know how to work together. When they work in the workspace, they will know how to work with other people. When they are hitting a slum, and we all go through that at times, they would know how to lead themselves and get up, because they are leaders with values and they are able to do a lot more than what society might perceive them to be. And so I just want to play a short clip of one of our young people who made his way in our program, and then I'll answer some of your questions.
Hi, my name is Imenya Malepe, 23 years of age, currently residing in Johannesburg, working at Nedbank as a contact center manager, and I am a Columba alumni. I grew up at the side of Lanseria, right here within Johannesburg. Columba became an answer to my clarification about my calling and my purpose within this universe, because me coming with my disabilities that affected my learning capacity. It clarified me what I needed to know about myself and really the contribution that I can bring within the universe. So I found my calling that actually lies within transferring knowledge to the next individuals. Can be teaching, can be motivating, can be giving a speech, but just transferring the knowledge to the next individuals. So currently I'm a manager at Nedbank. I'm leading a team of 11 staff. We are multiracial and different age gap. Most of them are older than me, only one person is younger than me. So how I got at Nedbank is through the impact of Columba, me coming to understand my purpose. I came back with the purpose that I want to make change within the society, but it has to start with me first. So starting with my self-conduct and how actually I address myself and present myself to the next individuals. Then I came with initiatives. I was like, you know what, since I saw that I have my shortcomings in learning capacity, so I want to be distinguished. So I have to introduce some things that are different that will make me to stand out. Nedbank also featured me in me giving my story of how I got the job at Nedbank and how am I still performing. I got at the call center for only 3 months because of my first 9 months. I was based at 135, which is our head office, and for me to get now a secure job, I had to be in a call center. So they gave me 3 months to go improve myself at the call center. Remember, now we're going to start with the product knowledge, and we're going to teach as well with call ethic, like how do you have a conversation with a client on the line in 3 months. And again, I have to shine and be a star in 3 months. Like, you know what, it's going to be easy. I'm just going to have what you call professionalism, flawless execution, but it only goes with plan, understanding yourself, and then you plan on how you will execute. Something that I really learned as a leader: before you can seek for performance within your team, you need to establish relationships so that you can all connect. My advice to everyone goes with knowing yourself. And please, this one is very powerful. Allow things to happen. Hi, my name is Malepe. Hi.
Thank you so much for all of your questions. I don't know if I'm going to get to all of them. Nazeem, you would also just help me.
I have taken copious notes, Monique, so I will try and take you through them and you can answer.
Lovely, thank you, Nazeem.
There's been a question, and no particular order, right? There's been a question about the role of parents and how supportive they've been within your program, and you know, in creating that supportive environment in the home. Would you like to comment on that? The role parents play in your program?
Definitely. So one of the things when we get the school ready for this program is that we engage all of the stakeholders in the school, starting from principal, SMT, to the entire grade of learners. And our last step before we take them to our residential academy is actually to present to the parents whose kids will be joining our program. And this is where we have a chance to actually engage them in saying, as a parent, how do you support this young person? Because they're going to come back from our program activated and charged to bring about change. And so they're not as actively involved in the school space, but they support their kids when they have to do the projects, and they just come alongside them in that way. So we frequently, sometimes we also have external researchers who come in and just get some feedback from the parents around the change they see in that young person and how that has changed in their home. It's brought about change in their home. But yeah, that's basically the only touch points that we have with the parents.
Thank you, Monique. Then there's been a number of requests, probably linked to how do they get in touch with Columba, how do they bring Columba into their organizations and access the program. There's been requests from Nompumelelo and Jeffrey for contact details for the KZN project manager. There's been a number of requests, Lynn and I see Evelyn also come through now about the project manager in the Eastern Cape. So if you could.
Sure. So I'm going to send our info email address. I'm going to put it in the chat box because that is how you would then, first you have to go through our central office, and I'm part of that team, and we would then send you through to the KZN people. But the guys on the on the link, whom I've seen ask specifically for the KZN one and the EC one. I will send them those people's email addresses, but it normally comes through the central office first, where I'm based. In terms of, I saw there was also a question around, you guys only work with schools or can individual learners join the program? We normally work through schools because it enables us a space where we can monitor, where we can also see that these young people are working together in groups, as opposed to having different young people from different communities, and it's difficult for us to get them to work together in collaboration with one another. But if there's any other organization that also wants to work with us in partnership, I know one of the key things that we've seen happening specifically in the COVID period is that as organizations and as NGOs, we can't work as silos. And sometimes if we work in collaboration with what you bring and what we bring, we can obviously just build something better for our young people. So please do reach out to us on our info@columba.co.za, and I'm going to put it in the chat box as well. I hope I answered that one, Nazeem.
Yes. There was also a related question, I think, around whether Columba works with online learners.
So we have a lot of online shows happening where young people can engage, but we can't take our leadership program online. It's not there yet. We have bits and pieces of it, but we have an online show that runs. So young people, alumni, normally go onto our Columba Talks. That's on YouTube, Columba Talks, and you can see a lot of the things that our young people do there. And it's a platform where it's youth to youth. Youth get to engage each other on relevant topics, or they can direct the content as well. So that is the online platforms that we use.
Thank you. And then there was a question from Charlotte around the selection of learners. And the question is really around, do educators play a role in the selection of learners?
Definitely. I think, Charlotte, we cannot exclude educators with the selection of learners. However, so we give them a guideline. Like I said, we want academic performers, underperformers, shy learners. We're not in the school every day, so we wouldn't know those learners. However, we know that educators can have bias, and they can only want to select their favorites or the normal children that they send on every other program. We have a piece in our program that's called the selection meeting. So once we've presented to all of the grade 10 learners and they've written their motivation why they want to become part of this program, we sit down with the educators who work with these grade 10 learners and actually know them very well, and take them through their selection process and ensure that we have a representation of each grade 10 class. We have a representation of each category, and that they really know why they've selected those young people. So it is a diverse group, but we cannot do the selection in isolation without the educators in the school.
Thank you, Monique. So there's been a number of questions around the selection process and criteria, and I think you've pretty much answered those. There was then a question from Struan, and I think this has got more to do with peer pressure and so, where he says that do learners experience pull him up, pull her down effect? How do you help them maintain their momentum in that case?
A good question. So one of our values is the values of perseverance, and that's one of the last. So we take a whole day to go through each value, and we intensely explore that. And we say to them, leadership isn't always easy. You know, we all been there. We know we get knocked down, and some days we don't even want to get up. So the first thing that they experience, and we prepare them for that, is the first thing that they experience when they go and want to implement projects in the school to address some of the things their own peers are doing is they're going to get resistance. And at that point in time, because we've had time with them to actually practice and role play, and it's a whole experiential experience where we at times play devil's advocate, where we give them that resistance even in the training space. We develop that in them. So when they go back to the school and the first thing they receive is resistance, and we come and we support them again, and we're like, this is exactly what we taught you. And we give them more skills to say, how do you continue remaining motivated? But the power of numbers as well is if there's more of you together, it's easier to withstand that resistance. But also that is why we need to train the educators and the principals in the school so that they can also be a support around these young people. I mean, they're still young and they are going to feel challenged because their peers are now saying, you think you're better than us, you want to come and change things in the school. So that's why it's so important to have that support structure around them, not just of us coming in every time and checking on them, but also of the educators and the principals around them.
Thank you. And then a final question, I think we've reached our time, is have you considered extending the program to the TVET colleges?
Not yet. We do, however, connect our young people to say that they should register to TVET colleges, you know, but we have not yet considered taking it there. I'll speak to our CEO. Could be a good consideration for us to take it there.
Okay. Thank you, Monique. As Monique has indicated, she has loaded the email address for Columba. She has also endeavored to provide the contact details for the program managers in the particular areas, the Eastern Cape and KZN in particular, that was requested. So please, that will come through, Monique, please, in the chat as we go along. Now, for our third program that has been funded by the Jobs Fund, we have with us Craig Duff, the CEO of the Newbridge Graduate Institute. Craig is very well known in the private education space, having been part of the establishment of very well-known institutions like Varsity College, etc. Is currently with Newbridge and doing very good work and a very good program in terms of providing affordable accessibility to our young people to the private education space. Over to you, Craig.
Thanks very much, Nazeem, and good morning, Najwah. Thanks for having us here. And good morning to all the delegates on this webinar. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. If you could please bring up my first slide. Thank you so much. Save the Children International CEO opened a speech at the Education World Forum in January 2017, where she said, "Education is the most empowering force in the world. It creates knowledge, builds confidence, and breaks down barriers to opportunities." Nothing could be more true than this. We are, however, currently facing a disconnect between education and employment, entrepreneurship, and job creation. And these are the things that I'd like to chat about and speak a little bit about what we are trying to do at Newbridge Graduate Institute to make sure we find the link between education and employment. I'll turn my camera off to make sure we support things from a bandwidth perspective. If you could please bring up my next slide. Thanks so much. I just would like to talk about 5 common challenges that we've faced, and this comes from having spent more than 30 years in private higher education. And I believe it's some of these 5 areas that actually lead to the breaking down of students passing from an educational environment and into a comfortable employment scenario. We within Newbridge Graduate Institute focus on 2 very distinct forms of education, both higher education, and we operate within the skills space where we work within areas of leadership, skills development through our Newbridge corporate division. And across both sectors, we find similar things taking place. One of the key issues, and it's been so refreshing to speak hearing what the work that's been done at Columba, that one can actually see many of these common problems Columba is actually striving very hard to speak. And the Columba spoke about how they are trying to prepare students for the transition. And it's strangely enough, some of the lack of preparation for transition is one of the biggest reasons that we find students not adequately fitting into post-school education. But before we even look at when the students actually take up post-school education, we find there's almost a mathematical problem with what's taking place within our country at the moment. We are under such pressure for places at all forms of education, be it higher education, further education, the TVET colleges, that we find so often students end up studying what they can get into or what they can afford and not actually studying what suits their interest, their aptitudes, or their specific skill set. And if we don't get students going into a form of study that are going to suit the type of person that they are, we are not going to have high-performing individuals that come out of the other end of a study situation. So it really would be great for us to find ways to do more career testing, more aptitude testing, to try and help students, and especially students that have come from potentially lower quintile schools that don't necessarily have the marks to get into chosen programs, but may well have the aptitude for it. So it's certainly one of the things that I think we need to find some way of addressing if we get to find students leaving schools, tackling education that's going to take them into an employment scenario. The second area that we actually find, and this is what Columbia spoke about, is the transition from school into post-school environments. Now, what is not often addressed well enough, within a school situation, we find teaching taking place, and it's certainly within smaller class groups. In many instances, when students transition from a school environment to a post-school environment, they move from an education process that turns from teaching and into lecturing. And the difference between lecturing and teaching could not be further apart. So very often we find students that they've been able to get through the schooling system where they've found good teaching taking place in the school. The process of lecturing is a completely different methodology. And if students do not get the assistance to transition from that taught to lecturing process, we find us losing many students within our post-school environment. We then find another process that we have learners that sometimes have to leave their childhood homes and support groups to travel away to get involved in post-school education. Once again, we find if the students do not go through the right levels of social change and support, we find students sometimes coming to the big cities and just finding it overwhelming that they don't fit in. Many of them may have come from a township or a rural environment, and the social change between the way they've grown up and the schools that they've been in and going into a university environment or any different post-school environment, an incredibly daunting one. As a result of some of the previous three issues that we've spoken about, we actually find a massive, massive cost burden being placed on the country and the education system, where we're finding many, many students do not complete their qualifications in the minimum completion time. Students should be finishing degrees in 3 or 4 years, but we're finding many students taking 5, 6, 7 years. And the moment you don't complete education within a minimum completion period, it sends a very negative message to the work environment about the student not being capable. But in actual fact, in many instances, it's not about the student being capable, it's about lack of transition or the ability to transition into a completely new teaching environment, social environment, and we find many students get lost a little bit along the way. And then probably a great concern is the high level of unemployed graduates that we have at the moment. This actually seems nonsensical. If you speak to many people and many employers, they tell us that they are battling to find people to fill posts that have got the skills and the ability to work in a job situation. It just seems like there's a complete impasse. How is it that we find the employers saying we can't find worthy candidates, yet we have thousands and thousands of unemployed graduates? And if one looks at these 5 common themes that very often lead to people not finding jobs, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we've done at Newbridge Graduate Institute to assist to try and get students into a space of completing qualifications, but more importantly than just completing qualifications, moving and finding jobs or becoming entrepreneurs once they finish their studies. If I could have the next slide, please. When we chose our name, it was chosen very specifically. The bridge is a very important part of our name. we see our jobs as educators to start by effectively being able to bridge students from a school environment into a post-school environment. We do this by starting the year off, by actually going through digital literacy, numeracy. We go through a process that we actually induct our students into an environment where we teach them about the different processes of what the learning is going to be about. Within our system, we actually get involved where we use hybrid teaching methods. And this hybrid teaching method is a very, very important part of what we do. Our role as educators is actually not just about preparing students for the working world. Our job as educators is actually about preparing students, one, for the working world, but two, to ensure that students can continue to develop, continue to actually upskill themselves as their environments at work change. As much as we went through the absolutely negative process of the COVID pandemic, we can see that the COVID pandemic has probably advanced teaching methodology by 5 or 10 years, where what was not really understood before, but is now commonplace, where there's a hybrid teaching methodology. So these are all processes that we want students to understand. One, to get into an environment where you actually taught how to bridge into a school environment or into a post-school environment, and then a follow-through to use modern teaching methodologies. And we start off by actually teaching students what a lecture process is about. We also introduce the students to hybrid online learning. And this is such a critical part of what we do. If we talk about, and there's stats thrown around that by the year 2030, 75% of jobs that exist today are not going to exist later. I think that's a bit of nonsense. But the reality is, what people do today in a current job is going to evolve so dramatically by 2030. If the student does not know how to learn, which we do today, unlearn, which may need to be taken on tomorrow, and learn again, they may find themselves moving into a situation that they are trading on skills that they learned 3 or 4 years ago, but the world is moving on. And as such, this hybrid teaching methodology, and I'll speak to you a little bit now in a short while about our Newbridge Accelerate Academy, we also teach the students how to study micro-credentials from online learning platforms that expose students to programs that are offered by both local and international universities. Programs that will teach you things like robotics, programs that will teach you things like actual programming and computer programming itself. There is no reason why a person that starts a qualification and they qualify with a BCom degree, and it may be a BCom degree within marketing and management, and they don't actually end up, because they've got a particular interest in it, moving into an area of information technology. The world has got so exciting in terms of what you can do online. But the frightening thing about online study, it currently has about a 7 to 12% completion rate. The reason that online study has such a low completion rate is that many students don't have the confidence to tackle online study, where once again, it's a completely different learning methodology. So again, we see our roles as educators is actually bridging students from school to post-school, from teaching to lecturing, to get involved in not just being comfortable with the process of face-to-face delivery, but being comfortable with the process of hybrid and online. Because at the end of the day, any student leaving school now needs to understand they will be a lifelong learner. Gone are the days that you went into an environment, got a job, and you slowly progress to the next 35. If we don't upskill, if we don't continue to learn, we create redundancy for ourselves. So the bridging process of where we go is very, very important. We also get into an environment, and this is very, very important to assist with the transition from school to post-school. We keep our class groups small. By keeping class groups small, and certainly as a private environment, we certainly have a privilege that many public universities don't have. but we are able to monitor students and we've very successfully developed what we call master classes. Within any class group, there are hugely different levels of understanding within a complete class setup. It's a process that we actually look in terms of what the assessment, how students participate and how they actually qualify through their assessment process, not qualify, but how they succeed in their assessment process, that we actually manage to go back and very often students have a baseline of understanding, but there are areas of concepts that they don't get and they don't understand. We get students back, and very often this is done through an online environment, and we teach our students about the online teaching process, where we have the ability to run master classes that take the students through concepts that they've missed in lectures, and we can actually see through assessment there's been a common area that's been missed. And this is one of the areas where this online education has catapulted what we can do. We now no longer have to get all the students back in a lecture room. We can now run a masterclass for students on a national basis, and we are a nationally based private education group that have missed certain concepts. And it's very often common concepts or threads that we can actually make available to the students. And then outside of all this that we do from an academic point of view, and quite clearly as an academic environment, that is what we need to focus on to make sure that our students get qualified. But we then launched 4 years ago a program called the Newbridge Accelerate Academy. And if I could please have the next slide. The Newbridge Accelerate Academy actually went through a process where we actually focused on 3 areas: professional and personal development. We offered, as I spoke about, international short learning programs and certifications that are done through partners of ours like edX and Coursera. And you can just see some of the universities that are available. And all our students are given the opportunity to study a program through one of these platforms. We then look very strongly to areas of industry-aligned work experience. Now, I would like to say that we perfected this. We've not yet perfected this. We drive very hard, and some of the things that we like to do with a student, and we're very happy if you are a first-year student, you don't necessarily have to find part-time work in an area specifically related to your studies. Work for a promotions company. Go and find a part-time job working in a retail environment over the weekend. Some of the issues that no matter where we are, and this is one of the disconnects that, and I think this is even why this webinar is taking place, is we try and find how we can actually get better employment opportunities of education. Higher education has got to, it's one of the areas we are starting to try and evolve ourselves with the Newbridge Graduate Institute. Universities and higher education study never used to be about making people work ready. But the workplace right now is expecting students to come out with degrees, higher certificates, and be ready to work. We cannot simulate a work environment in a lecture room. So if we don't get the students out there participating in work environments, just basic things like how to handle yourself in an interview, how to get involved and carry yourself when you do get an opportunity. If you had a part-time job, get a reference. These are things that build your CV. A large part of our Newbridge Accelerate Academy journey is to build student CVs, give them experience, that this runs alongside what we actually do from the education we give at a higher education environment. Now, we've also found quite a bit of success within some of this area where we obviously work within our leadership and our skills development space. And there we actually find the whole process of the skill support and the work integrated learning that takes place around the leadership space being very, very encouraging. But we've actually taken some of these methodologies and have had great success in our leadership and skills development space by actually sitting down and dealing with some of the soft skills. And I think all our three speakers today, the previous two speakers, we've all spoken about soft skills. Our whole journey within this Newbridge Accelerate Academy is to look at the individual, look at the person, and see how we can give them the soft skills that are very often that barrier between getting a qualification and actually getting the qualification that leads to a job. When you go into an interview situation, your qualification and the skill set shows that you have the ability to learn, you have the ability to interpret what's going on. But then when you sit down in an interview, it's about the person, because at the end of the day, people get employed, qualifications don't. And that is probably the biggest mantra that we actually run through within Newbridge Graduate Institute. We need to develop individuals. We can't just develop groups of people, because at the end of the day, the education matters to every single individual, not a graduating class. And that's some of the big focus that we've got to prepare students for that work environment. And if I could then have the next slide, please. So we use these different processes of actually starting before a student comes, where every student is interviewed by a student advisor, that we try and look at what they are suited to, as opposed to what they are able to afford or what they are able to get into. To this end, and Newbridge Graduate Institute was only made available through a very, very valuable partnership with Summit Africa. Summit Africa is one of the top ESG investment companies within Africa. And the biggest thing that Summit did when we actually formed our Newbridge Graduate Institute model is to speak about the fact that we needed to create levels of affordability, accessibility, with a key focus on transformation. We at Newbridge Graduate Institute subscribe to all principles of ESG, but probably the most important part for us in ESG is the S, the social impact. And social impact will not be created by education alone. Social impact will be created through education that leads to employment. Our biggest focus on life is to actually have students that come into our system and think about employment, entrepreneurship, and job creation, and not just about graduation. At the end of the day, education can bring dignity, but there is no greater dignity in our education channel than dignity that a student will find by finding employment and becoming a meaningful part of the South African economy and a meaningful part of supporting families and the environments, the communities that they come from. And through this very short chat, and I hope I've given you a little bit of an overview, is the whole focus and the reason that we get out of bed in the morning is to actually run an education system at both higher education and within skills, that our goals have got to be, let's educate the students to find employment. It is only through employment that true dignity is created. And that gives you a little bit of a background in terms of what we are trying to do. And I can assure you, we've not perfected everything, but every day we work at it. We get better all the time. And through the support of people like the Jobs Fund and the partners we've had, we've been able to create affordability. We continue to look for corporate partners that can create bursary opportunities for students. But at the end of the day, our education has got to lead to dignity and employment. That's what gets us going every single day. That's what excites us about being in this particular sector of South Africa at the moment. Thank you very much for listening. And I'll turn my camera on to take some questions from the floor.
Thank you, Craig. There's been a number of questions. Firstly, there's been another request for you to share your contact details. There's been a request particularly from the KZN region, how they access your institutions and so on. Then there was a question around digital skills, which I think you've answered. You in part of your presentation, you've spoken to how you incorporate digital skills into your learning programs. There was a question around, are assessment done in mother tongues of learners?
So we assess with our language policy as English. our method of delivery from an education perspective is English. It is potentially an indictment on a South African set of circumstances, but we are creating people to go into the South African job market, into the international job market. And as such, we find it very important that people have the ability to operate from an English perspective. We certainly assist students right the way through and help them and assist from a mother tongue perspective, but our method of delivery and assessment is within English.
Okay. And then there was a question from Stroan. Sorry, I need to read it. It's quite long. And it's around subject choice. I think you mentioned it. People choose what they can get into. It's about how do we encourage students to make more sensible choices? And you know, what process can be used to encourage that? So I think there's a lot of pressure in doing that.
It's such a difficult, that's such a difficult area. Growing up, many students will hanker after things that they are comfortable with or they've been exposed to. We speak about, and the previous speakers have spoken about quintile 1 and quintile 2 schools. It's students in those areas that probably have some of the most difficult career decisions to make. In that there aren't necessarily always households that have the ability to lead students in terms of what is taking place in the working world. In our own world, we have interviews with students, and we actually have career assessments available for all students. And one of the biggest things we look to, and there's a whole battery of tests that can be done, but there are fairly simple interest inventories that students can go through to get a clear idea of the sorts of things they should be focusing on. This is an area that I wish I could give you that we have the absolute answer. We don't. We just know that schools need to start doing more in terms of interest inventories and starting to channel students towards areas of interest. One of the things, and this is potentially for another discussion that concerns me greatly, we seem to in certain areas have lost aspiration for people going into areas of skills and TVET colleges, yet it is probably one of the areas, if you go into a skills environment for a TVET college, that could be one of the shortest routes into entrepreneurship. So we just need to do more. And I mean, if this could be something that could be a takeout from this discussion, how do we offer more career counseling and assessments of aptitude to students to try and help them better choose the areas that they'd like to go into? A person that is a square peg in a round hole will never be successful. And it's a big barrier in terms of why students are dropping out, failing, because they're not motivated about the area of study that they're involved in.
Thank you, Craig. And then a question from Stephen, who was very interested in the affordability and accessibility you were talking about of Newbridge's offerings, and particularly, are they accessible to youth from more excluded backgrounds?
So what is the last part of your question then, Nazeem?
It was about whether your offerings are accessible to youth from excluded backgrounds.
Okay, so yes, very definitely. And this is, again, only being made available by the partnership between ourselves and Summit Africa. We have 2 forms of bursary concepts available. We have many corporates that work with us in terms of, and the change in the skills levy, where companies can now give part of their skills levy towards higher education bursaries. That has actually opened ourselves up to being able to offer a lot of student bursaries. But Summit's commitment to education is that this 2023 year, as a private company, we gave out over 40 million rands worth of bursaries to students from different backgrounds. We have students on full bursary, and one of our biggest prizes in Durban, we have a child that grew up on the streets, that is on a full bursary at Newbridge Graduate Institute in Durban, and will graduate with a degree at the end of this year.
Okay. Thank you, Craig. Oh,
And so we've got bursaries available, yeah.
thank you. Craig, just one question. Do you have an entrepreneurial policy where you integrate those type of skills into your programs?
So we have specific skills within entrepreneurship, and that's a very, very interesting question. And there's many people there's many environments where they talk about entrepreneurship, and we know it's going to be the key to many opportunities from a South African perspective.
Yeah.
I sometimes find the word entrepreneurship being too big, in that entrepreneurs, if we talk about people like Richard Branson, they have a very specific skill set. And I would actually like to connect with our first speaker about the early childhood development work that we are doing. We believe there's two things that need to run alongside education, and we do both, depending on the nature of the student, to offer opportunities to entrepreneurship, but also to start offering business skills. For a person that runs an early childhood development center, they're actually running a business. They may not see themselves as entrepreneurship, but we need to still teach business skills that run alongside of it. So we have both opportunities available. Business development and entrepreneurship. They're two different types of people, and we do have both opportunities available for our students. And we're starting to marry some very interesting concepts of things like new venture creation to our skills development for people that would like to start new businesses after a higher education qualification.
Thank you, Craig. I think we're running out of time quickly. We're trying to stick to the time. Craig has posted, there's a number of questions around how to get into contact with Craig. He's posted his email address on the website. Craig, your program is it accessible to matriculants, or are you targeting matriculants as well?
But from a higher education perspective, it's mainly a focus on people that have completed matric. We have higher certificates, so people don't just have to have the bachelor passes to get in. And then from a skills development perspective, we don't require school leavers, and we've got some fantastic opportunities in terms of our skills development through our leadership division and Newbridge Corporate.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thank you again to all of our speakers. You very good insights as to where we go from here to address what everybody recognizes a very big problem. Just finally from me, we have posted on the chat our evaluation form for us to improve our presentations and the way we communicate our learnings and the forums we do it through and how we do it. Very important that you assist us in improving, in completing those evaluation forms. To close our session, again, thank you. I will hand you over to the head of the fund, Najwah, to give her closing remarks. Thank you, Najwah.
Thank you, Nazeem. Thank you so much, Hopolang, Justine, Monique, Craig, and Nazeem. Thank you to all of you who have participated and asked those very important questions, allowing everybody else to benefit from the answers. I'm deeply encouraged by this conversation that we are having here this morning. It is clear that the work that is being done does not treat youth or our learners as an event. So yes, we find ourselves in the month of June. It has been billed as Youth Month, but it is very clear that to be successful and to meaningfully support our learners and our youth, we cannot treat them as an event. That this is an ongoing journey, an ongoing process, that solving for the access gap remains tantamount and remains critical in this particular landscape. We've heard about social franchise models and how this is a potential response to the massive problem that we have in early childhood development. We've heard about the importance of the bridging programs, GRAP training to support our learner transitions. I'm encouraged by the participants here reaching out to each other, wanting to connect, wanting to partner, wanting to roll out similar models in other spaces, in other parts of our country. And doing all of that, creating this bigger partnership that is required. We need a connected ecosystem. We need partnerships if we are to competently and successfully and sustainably address the challenges that we have. We require intermediation, connecting learners to employers. We've heard about the importance about a simple thing, such as career counseling, and how that, provides the foundational blocks for young people to understand and to appreciate what their pathway could possibly look like. So the work that all of you do, presenters, participants alike, ensuring dignity for our learners and our youth, continues to be such very, very important work. So I want to say to all of you again, thank you so much. Thank you for the participation. Thank you for growing the implementation capability in this very, very important space. As we've said, the presentation will be available on our website. To find out more about the Jobs Fund's 11th funding round, please go to our website. There's a very hard close date on the 17th of July. We encourage you to submit quality applications so that together we can break down barriers that our learners are confronted with, that our youth are confronted with, and importantly, that our unemployed masses are confronted with. Thank you very much, and I wish you a good day further.